And the defense is like, well, maybe she cracked her head on the first stair and like her head exploded basically as she was going down. Right. You're like, what the hell? How is there blood everywhere? Welcome back to Lawish. We're going to be discussing two topics we have discussed previously in other episodes, just giving updates on both situations and, as far as what happened since we last discussed these. One is regarding Andrew Tate and his ongoing saga in Romania. And then Andrew Murdaugh and the...
Alex, bro.
Or Alex, sorry. The one person.
Yeah.
Andrew. Alex Tate.
They're the same.
Alex Tate. We're going to be...
They're the same person. They both are murderers and,
what? Allegedly.
Just human traffickers.
Well, one of them's officially, I guess. Okay. But anyway, and then Alex Murdaugh and the outcome of the trial and sentencing and kind of, what happened with that and, I guess kind of the implications of that as far as, obviously what it means for him, which is pretty clear from now, but also kind of what was kind of key, I guess, evidence at the trial that ultimately kind of led to his conviction. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff. So if you don't remember or you've been living under a rock and you don't know what the Alex Murdaugh stuff is we talked about it briefly in our previous episode, but Alex Murdaugh was an attorney. He doesn't have a license anymore in South Carolina, and his wife and his youngest son were murdered on their property. So he was arrested, recently convicted, and sentenced for the murder of both his wife and his youngest son, Paul. Paul Murdaugh is the son. Maggie Murdaugh is his late wife. So he was convicted on March 2, so a week ago, almost. And it was really interesting because
on Friday, right?
He was sentenced like on Friday, but I think he was convicted. He was convicted on the 2nd and then sentenced on Friday, because as you may know, the conviction and sentencing happens. They both happen at different times. So he was sentenced just this past weekend, and the sentence is 2 life terms in prison. Yeah. So the guy is dying in prison.
He's not going anywhere.
Yeah, he's dying in prison. But the interesting thing here with his case, and we talked a little bit about it in the previous episode, but it was the whole many decisions that would happen. So you had his older son, I think his name is Buster. He was testifying on behalf of his dad and saying, my dad was devastated when this happened and whatnot. But you also had one of Alex's brothers also testify on his behalf. And so it was one of those where okay, so even if you are a part of that family and you have an inkling of a suspicion or something in you telling you my dad or my brother killed these other members of my family, it's interesting to see how or to just speculate even what the cognitive processes are for you to say I'm going to testify on his behalf. Yeah. Right?
Yeah, imagine being in that position.
Yeah, exactly.
And I know we kind of talked about this before, and I understand with juveniles, if they're the victims or there's this, or maybe a lone survivor in a situation, there's this kind of you want to protect, because all you know is your family, especially when you're a juvenile. There's people you're closest to, obviously, and there's this kind of they're all you have left, and it's I think there's almost self-preservation of kind of what you know. It's well, you don't want to believe that they could possibly do anything like that because that's really all you have, or you feel like that's all you have left. But these are adults, and it's it's not. I guess part of that could still be true, but you have other social connections, you have other people in your life. Yeah, that's not really the case anymore. So I don't think there's the same psychological kind of whatever situation going on, and it's weird. It's you would think, and I guess there is still that you don't want to believe the person that you're that close to, your parents or your whoever, whatever, your brother, whatever the case may be, could possibly do something that horrible. Especially because you've been so close to them for so long. I can't imagine it's easy to convince your mind that they are capable of doing that. Yeah. But at the same time, if
we're speculating, there could also be a situation where they're oh, fully believe they did it, and I fully believe they're capable of doing it. And I don't want to be on the receiving end of that.
Yes,
So I might as well be on the good side, right? And it's one of those where, I mean, you mentioned it during the last episode. It was like, this is a very stressful and traumatic situation, but if they want to look at it this way, it's like, well, they're gone. Nothing I do was going to bring them back.
Yeah.
Might as well not make my life miserable and try to come out the best way possible.
Yeah, especially if, like, you know, you're concerned that there's other people involved in whatever happened.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because there are connections or whatever. Because it's one thing, you're like, well, wouldn't you want to convict him so he's not capable of doing anything like that to you? But
yeah,
you know, who knows? There's so many different factors at play.
Yeah.
But the point is, it's like it makes you think. You're like, what if I were in that position? Like, what would I do? And I don't know. Like, it's crazy to kind of. Well, I mean, I think I know what I would do. But it's like, but like thinking about it, though, you're like, that's gotta be. Yeah, I mean, he's innocent. He didn't do anything. But yeah, just thinking about it, it's like kind of.
They're like winking at him.
It's weird. He's totally innocent.
Yeah, I'm his alibi.
Yeah, that's right.
No, that is fair. It's an interesting just thought exercise to go through and be like, well, what would I do? Not just trying to put yourself in their shoes, but it's like, what would I do if I were in that position too? It's gotta be hard to even fathom it. But so one thing that I wanted to get your thoughts on was the fact that he testified. Yeah. Like he actually took the witness stand, and that's something that, as we've learned in law school, is like whenever you are representing the defendant, you almost always don't want the defendant to take the stand. Yeah. There are obviously situations when it makes sense to have him testify, and I'll let you talk about those. But the reason I think is interesting, and we should maybe spend a couple minutes talking about that, is because the ever since the sentencing got done and there's a gag order that it gets lifted, there have been a couple of jurors that have come out of the woodworks and talk about their experience and their thoughts and whatnot. And a good number of them seem to agree that a big player or a big factor in them finding him guilty was the fact that he undermined his own case by testifying.
Yeah. I think that, yes. Well, for the start with, generally, yeah, I'd say you don't. The issue is, though, there's this kind of, our system set up where they shouldn't have to testify, right?
Right.
State has the burden. They have to prove their case. You, theoretically, shouldn't have to do anything.
Yeah. And your silence is not construed as a sense of guilt.
It's not supposed to be. But
right.
I think a lot of jurors and a lot of judges, even though they're supposed to know better, technically, want to hear them speak. And if they don't, they're like, well, why aren't they? Yeah. Why wouldn't you? If you were innocent, why wouldn't you, want to tell your story? And so, even though we know a million reasons as attorneys why you wouldn't want to,
and it's the same thought process that goes with like wrongful convictions, right? And it's like, well, if you're innocent, why did you confess? Like, who would ever confess to a crime they didn't commit? Exactly. It's like, well, no, there's plenty of situations where this happened.
It's ignorance of the legal system. It's ignorance of how things work that leads you to that conclusion. It's the same thing, with the innocence movement and in general taking the stand. And I think it's never an easy choice. Some cases, there's definitely, you're like, it makes a lot of sense. You're like, well, sure, there's potential issues that could happen, but you look at it and you're like, especially if your client is very credible, if it's a situation where maybe the facts aren't in dispute, but it's kind of what happened surrounding those facts. So say it's an assault case or something, it's like, okay, well, nobody's denying that your client punched somebody. It's why, what happened, and the one guy's going to say, obviously, he was attacked. Whatever the case, maybe it was jumped. It's like, you might need that other narrative to come in some way. And if you don't have another way to really do it, at least one way that's going to really kind of be believable to the jury. It depends on the situation. I would say, though, overwhelmingly, maybe 25% of your cases, and some people might be even less. I'd say I did about 25, where I'd have the client take the stand. Generally, if you don't need them to, you don't want them to. With this being what it was, I could see the inclination to be like, okay, well, the jury's going to want to hear him speak. These were horrible, crimes, but I wouldn't have had him take the stand. Yeah. I think not only, but I don't think the issue was just having him to take the stand. It's what he said on the stand. Right. I think,
and to be fair, I think that the reason why he wanted to take a stand to say what he said on the stand was, I assume his legal team thought, if we have to admit to lying to the police, it's probably better. It's going to make him look more human if he's the one that says it and not just us saying, well, this happened, but think about it this way. He was
Yes.
scared or he was whatever. So I can see why they would want to go that route. But I feel like also a very difficult process that goes through your mind as an attorney is, okay, let me do that cost-benefit analysis. And do I think that the potential risk, meaning exposing your client to, if he's not a good witness, to say stuff that is going to undermine your case, or putting them in a bad light with the jury, is that going to be a good price to pay in exchange for whatever marginal benefit you get from hearing him speak?
Yeah, because the burden, the hurdle they had to overcome in this was his voice, right?
Right, on the video of his son.
So it was like, okay, what do you say that's not him? Do you just kind of let it be? I don't think you can just let it be. But do you say, like, just because basically somebody's voice could sound like him, that doesn't mean it's him? Or, because I think him taking the stand, and of course they want to try to explain that away, right? Because they're like, well, he said he wasn't there, but we hear him. Like, what's going on? And so I guess his defense was like, well, we'll just say that, he lied because he was afraid or whatever the case may be. But then it's even more problematic because not only did he, then confirm that was in fact his voice, that he was there. So his alibi was
then
gone.
you place yourself in that
Place
position.
yourself at a crime scene right when this happened.
Yeah. And there's 3 people there, and only one of you walked out alive.
It's alive.
So,
and you didn't say, oh, I saw somebody else was
Yeah.
there, they attacked me, I ran away. None of that other potential thing that would have explained that potentially ever occurred. And what made it even more, I think, problematic too was not only did he place himself at the scene, but then his reason for lying. He talks about being on drugs, and it's like, dude, 2 things are wrong with that, right? One, you're on fucking drugs. Like, it makes it more likely that maybe you would have done something crazy like kill your family
because of being on drugs.
Even if there wasn't a reason, that happens all the time. Or maybe you don't even recall killing your family. Like, so it's like the fact that he not only didn't place himself on the scene, but then he said he was under the influence of drugs at the time this occurred, did not help him in any way.
That just makes it more likely that you could have in a fit of drug-induced rage or mania or something makes you actually do it.
I think that's...
And then you come down and you start then trying to cover your tracks and do all the stuff that he did.
That was the most damning piece of evidence for sure, was his testimony, putting himself in the crime scene.
Yeah.
And then coming up with the excuse that he was on drugs and, whatever. And it's like, dude, that was the case right there.
That did not help.
There's other things like they talked about the shower, and his brother had said that he basically just had taken a shower. He said he did it prior because he knew they were going out. Prosecution obviously says he probably did it afterwards to clean up the blood or the evidence or whatever, which is obviously a possibility. Right? So that didn't help. But of course, who knows? It's a shower. Could have happened before, could have happened after. Nobody was really able to prove one way or another. And some of the other stuff was kind of like, okay, well, yes, it could be looked at as being, indicative of criminality or guilt, but it could also be innocently explained away. When you place yourself at the crime scene, right at the time when this happened, you're the only one that's still alive. Yeah. And then also... And
there have not been any allegations of other people being there.
He never once mentioned somebody else being there. There was a struggle. He heard something.
Because it would have been different if he said, you know what, I did lie because of drugs, which is a stupid reason. Yeah. But it's like, I did lie, but let me tell you, I saw 2 guys,
and I was
descriptions or whatever, and I was afraid. Exactly. Or you know what? I was able to escape, but I didn't want to say that I was there because of drugs. Whatever. But no, he just says, never mind, I was there. Yeah. That's it. Yes. So, okay. Well, you're the only one that's alive, and you were there. What the hell, dude?
Yeah. And another thing that the defense really hit on, which did help them, but, 2 people testified how distraught he was and upset. But again, it's like, just because you killed your family doesn't mean you're not going to be bothered by it.
You're not going to feel it, exactly.
Yeah. Especially if you were on drugs and you killed them potentially while you were high and weren't really fully aware of what you were doing, or at least you weren't in the right mindset. And then after the fact,
you come down and you see what you did.
Yes. So, I mean, that's easily explained away too. But it's like, at least it does help the defense to an extent, even though there's another explanation for it, which is, much less innocent. Him placing himself in the crime scene was the dumbest thing he could have done. Yeah. Yeah, and his attorney's putting on the stand, and I imagine they told him, I don't think he just pulled that out of his ass. I imagine they told him, hey, okay, we got to find a way to explain why you were, say that's you because your voice is going to be heard. Mm-hmm. So obviously they got you on that, which I don't think I would even admit it to that, but they got you on that. Now you're going to say you lied to the cops, because you obviously did, because now you're there and you said you weren't. Well, okay, how do we explain that? Like, drugs. Drugs. Like, what?
And that seems to be the revolving theme on his testimony. It was like, drugs. Yeah. I was on drugs. I was addicted to drugs. And I felt personally like they overdid it.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, dude, but you can just like explain everything away with drugs.
Exactly.
It's like, because...
And nobody's going to feel sympathetic.
Yeah, and exactly. And there were times when you, a wealthy lawyer... Mm-hmm. who is addicted to painkillers, is affirmatively and very cleverly stealing money from other people to feed your drug addiction. So it's not like, oh, I was out of my mind on this whole, blur of months or whatever because of my drugs. No, you obviously were able to plan and execute rather well many schemes to get money to fuel your drug addiction. Yes. So it's like that there comes a point where the drug excuse kind of like loses its power. Yeah. And I feel like he overdid it.
He did, and a lot of the jury, like the jurors that I heard talk, and were basically said that everything he said seemed scripted. It seemed very rehearsed. It seemed like he talked really quickly. He knew what he was going to say. It was like just waiting for the question so he can. I mean, it's not uncommon. You see it all the time.
Yeah, you prep your witnesses.
Well, you can't tell them what to say, but you pretty much just tell your story. Tell us what happened. And you kind of lead them you basically tell them what to say without telling them what to say. And so that's exactly what. But the problem is when you do that, that's what happens, right? If you do a more kind of open, it's not an open discussion, but sort of, where you're leading them to like, hey, this is what we're trying to get across in this, or this is what we need to show the jury or the judge. I'm going to ask you these questions, and you kind of run it through them with them and let them tell their story how they would normally tell it. You don't tell them what to say. If obviously there's issues, you bring it up. But that's why you do trial prep. Yeah. You question them first. You cross-examine them like you're the prosecutor when you're the defense, and you try to see what might come up, where they might mess up. Mess up is in saying, even, and this isn't them telling the truth, messing up, but they might say something that comes off incriminating, and that's not what they meant or whatever. And of course, the prosecution's going to jump on. Yeah. So a lot of that will come out during that prep, but when you have bad attorneys, in my opinion, or it could have just been him. Maybe he insisted because he thinks he knows better because he's an attorney on these scripted kind of answers. But it's like that, is, especially to a jury. One, the judge is going to see through it, but a jury absolutely goes on emotion and stuff like that. Yeah, they just weren't buying any of it. Exactly. That combined though with his comment putting himself at the crime scene and. Is less than adequate explanation for well, not only why he was there, but why he lied about being there, with no other alternative theory as to how his family ended up dead and he's not. Yeah, was very problematic. So.
No, that makes total sense. And to your point about the jurors talking about how it seemed like he had like overly rehearsed his answers and whatnot, they were saying that they did not believe his. Tears, his sadness. It seemed like he was turning it like on and off, as it suited his version of the events. What is very interesting when it comes to the jury deliberation is that he was found guilty of both murders, resulting eventually in a sentence of 2 life terms in prison in less than 3 hours. Yeah. But then I read a different article where it said
the trial like 7 days or something crazy.
Yeah, the trial was like it was only I think it was like a week. Yeah,
it was only supposed to be like 3 days initially or something like that, which is normal time.
And it was like went into like day 5 because when we did the episode, it was day 5, I think, and it still went for a couple more days. So, but the interesting thing about the deliberation is the one article saying he was found guilty after the jury deliberated for less than 3 hours, but the jurors say that. It only took them 45 minutes to reach that unanimous verdict, meaning like nobody believed them at least strongly enough to be a holdout in the jury pool, or I guess the actual jury. So that just comes to show his defense made a decision to allow him to take the stand, and it did not pay out.
Well, and the thing is, and I was listening to one juror talk, and he said that there was 3, like, they weren't holdouts, but so everybody was in agreement, but there was 3 people who like had issues with some pieces of evidence.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, oh, we think he's innocent, but it was just like, well, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
What about
What's
this?
going
Yeah.
on with this?
Which would explain why you go from 45 minutes to no, everybody's like, yeah, we all agree he's guilty, but then to the actual, an extra 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Yeah.
To
There's literally just clarifying, and then
tie maybe some loose ends or something.
They said after they had gotten them kind of like that clarification, and so everybody was on board. Then they just went through like each piece of evidence, kind of okay, this is this, piece by piece to try to like make sure they weren't missing everything. And then that was also kind of took more time, but they had already known at that point. It was just kind of like double checking your work situation.
Exactly. Yeah.
At that point, it's like when you go.
And
back
it makes
over an
sense
exam,
because if you're gonna go that route, you want to be at least even for your own conscience, you want to be as sure as you can be based on the information that you're given. So I think it makes sense.
And a big potential issue with this trial, since it went on for so long, was like, one, is the jury paying attention, and 2, are they going to remember what the hell happened during, they'll have whatever gets actually admitted into evidence to review, but stuff that's not admitted, we know all the time, there's a lot of stuff that won't actually get admitted into evidence for the jury to review later after the fact in the back room. That's just their memory. They got to remember, think back what happened, what was said, and then you know how things work. You ask somebody, they're going to tell you something that they misremember, then you're going to tell somebody else, and it's going to be like a different.
There's going to be this dysmorphia of everybody's recollections.
But one of the jurors that being interviewed said that he was like surprised that like everybody throughout was supposedly really zeroed in, which it's an interesting trial, so I could see that. You get a boring trial, it's like a civil matter, nobody's gonna pay attention. Or it's like a theft, no one cares, or they might even understand it if you're talking about like some white collar crime that's like money laundering or something. But when it's a murder, and it's something like
you tend to have more engaged jurors.
It's like true crime, but in real life, and people are like,
you get to be a part of it. It's like wow,
So everybody's gonna be locked in. So I don't think that was really an issue with this case, and it wasn't like the O.J. Simpson trial where it's like months or whatever until that took.
And that could also cut both ways because it's like, oh my God, true crime, I'm part of it now. And that could also just have you in such a heightened state that you start reading into things that you shouldn't be reading into, right? So it kind of cuts both ways. But for, in generally speaking, I agree with you, that just essentially makes people pay more attention more closely. The last thing that I wanted to mention on the Alex Murdaugh update, because really all there is left to do is see if they appeal. I don't know that they probably will because it makes sense to do it. I don't know that it'll make any difference. But was that a recent article also was, there was an interview in the New York Times where they interviewed his brother, Randolph Murdaugh. And so he did not testify at trial, and he only attended, the trial a certain number of days. But the one thing that he said is, and I'm paraphrasing, so I may myself maybe misremembering it, but he said something like along the lines of like he didn't really necessarily had an opinion on whether his brother did it or not. But he said unequivocally, I do believe that he knows more than what he's saying. So I don't think he's telling the full truth.
Yeah, maybe he didn't pull the trigger, but he knows some more.
And that could lead you to something like that. And now, if we then let our imaginations run wild based on this, right, and just kind of like extrapolate, think about, Alex Murdaugh is not above hiring someone to kill because he hired someone to kill himself, so that his son could, get the insurance money.
Yes, and another option is maybe they were married, or maybe it wasn't him, and maybe he's scared that he's going to be next. Maybe it was he owed people money. They killed his family, and he was there. To send a message and like pay us our shit or else kind of thing. And obviously he knows if he says anything about that, he's also going to be killed. It's possible. Yeah. And I think honestly, that's why they should have just made it if the defense. And usually you don't want to do this, especially with a murder case, but I don't think you should have taken a stand. I think they should have made it a burden case. They should have said, okay, we don't even know if that's him. But if even if it was him, it could have been maybe somebody else was talking to him on the phone in the background. Maybe, there was a recording. Maybe, who knows? Maybe there was a third party that did kill. There's all these other narratives you could have painted. But once he says, yeah, I was there and I was on drugs, it's like that's
and there's
that's
no
not
other
gonna
explanation.
fly, you know, and there was no other. Yeah, there's no other. And people want to hear another explanation because you put him on the fucking stand. Yeah. If you didn't put him on the stand, they're not going to expect that. You could have put all these other possibilities of what could have possibly happened, thrown it at the wall, and the jury's going to at least be thinking, well, maybe that kind of makes sense. He did owe people money, or maybe that was, whatever. They didn't fucking do that.
Yeah. I mean,
get on the fucking stand and
the super simple version is, if you're putting him on the stand, then that means he's telling his side of the story.
Yeah.
And when his side of the story is like super incomplete and doesn't really help him at all, well then it's like, well then you just fucking yourself.
Because then they're like, well, if there was somebody else there, why didn't you say that?
Yeah.
If there was some other narrative, and then you throw out the potential that wasn't him. You throw out the potential that maybe it was him, but it was a recording.
Yeah.
You throw out all these other potential things. Right away, you narrow all of it down to he was in fact fucking there. And then he didn't mention any other people being there.
His side of the story really consisted of, yeah, I lied.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, bro. Well, then are you trying to save yourself?
Just took a stand and said, I'm guilty. Like, I did it. Like, at that point. Like,
yeah, exactly. It was really bad.
Yeah. And I think that's on his attorneys. But he's also an attorney. It's like, and ultimately the decision to take the stand is, see, that's the other thing. I don't know if the attorneys told him to do it or not, because ultimately it's your client's choice.
Yeah.
Maybe he insisted. Or maybe, I mean, he should have known better either way. I mean, he's a fucking attorney. So even if they said, yeah, we think you should take the stand, I don't know. It was a horrible decision either way.
Like,
It was really... Yeah, really bad decision.
Well, fun times. If you guys want to check out more about this story and you don't want to be like reading articles, there's this really cool documentary on Netflix called the Murdaugh Murders. Yeah. And it actually is really interesting because it touches on some of the stuff that we talked last time, where the documentary really starts with the crash, the boat crash that we talked about, where Paul was driving drunk and had a bunch of friends with him on a boat. They crash on this bridge, and one of the girls ends up dead. Yeah. One of the girls that he was one of his friends. So they start with that, but then they also touch on the death of the housekeeper. Yeah. That was also on their property, like the accidental death.
Tripped over a dog and then fell in the stairs.
Exactly, and then Alex suing himself on behalf of the state of the housekeeper, so that presumably, or not presumably, but allegedly, so that he could take care of her family, essentially saying, I'm going to sue myself so that my insurance pays you money and you guys can be taken care of. Yeah. Turns out he takes that money himself.
Surprise.
Yeah, exactly. So they go over all this stuff, and it's really, really interesting. Even there's testimony of the people that were on the boat with Paul at the time, the people who were like working on the grounds of the house during the whole housekeeper thing. They also talk about that classmate of Buster that also was found dead in the middle of the road with his car like a certain number of miles away, and how after the Paul and Maggie murders, the police reopened that investigation. So it talks about a lot of this stuff, and it's really interesting. So I recommend people check it out if you want to.
No, it's definitely an interesting case in the background, like I said, leading up to it. It reminds me of that other Netflix documentary. I think it's called like The Stairs or whatever the hell.
Oh yeah, I haven't seen that one, but I know the case that
I believe there's
discussing.
3 total accidents that happen where people fall down the steps. So this guy, I think he dates like 3 different people, or maybe one of them was a housekeeper, but ultimately 3 people die by falling down the stairs all around
the same circumstances.
All around this guy, the same circumstances, yeah. And 2 of them were like his wives. And the last one, he ultimately gets convicted of, but he gets away with 2 of them. And obviously, the more that it happens, the less people are to believe that this was an accident.
Yeah.
But even the last one, there was a lot of people who, obviously his defense team, but a lot of people too in like different parts of the innocence movement that were like, oh, he's innocent, he didn't do it. It's like, look, just because there's questionable evidence does not mean this person's innocent.
Yeah.
At some point, you have to think rationally. Yeah. And say, look, 3 people end up dead. Like, what are the chances that this is happening?
Specifically because to begin with, the chances of you dying, falling from the stairs in any place are slim. I mean, it's possible. But then the chances of 3 different people dying for the same reason, meaning falling from the stairs, on the same place, like in the same house.
Oh, no, they're different houses.
Oh, they're different houses?
They followed this guy throughout his life. He went like... But that made it even worse.
Wait, I thought it was the same house.
In the same
Again,
staircase.
I haven't seen this thing. I just know
No.
So there was these 3 people who died in similar circumstances, meaning falling from the stairs, in 3 different houses, but the 3 houses were owned by the same guy.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
It's either called The Stairs or The Staircase or some shit like that. But
yeah, I remember like scrolling past it.
It's like this story where you're like something's like, after a while you're like, wait a minute.
Whatever happened with that guy? Was he convicted?
Oh yeah, the last time he was. Yeah, he still says he's innocent, of course. But the last, and you could tell when they were doing the trial prep on the last case, the guy had no remorse for anything. He didn't feel bad about his wife dying. Like,
Yeah.
there was just like, you just felt he was
Checked
very
out.
arrogant.
Yeah.
He was like that kind of like, oh, I've gotten away with it. Of course, this is just me speculating based on what I saw. It seemed like he was like very much like, I've gotten away with it so far. I'm untouchable. I'm not going to be convicted of this. This is all bullshit. They said or whatever. He kept saying, this didn't happen. I didn't do it. But it was like, I mean, I didn't see the guy as being trustworthy at all. So from the beginning of that, and then of course you see all this happened 2 other fucking times. It was like there was so much blood. Blood was everywhere. And the defense is like, well, maybe she cracked her head on the first stair and like her head exploded basically as she was going down. Right. You're like, what the hell? How was there blood everywhere? Because, the prosecution was saying like she got hit over the head, with like a blunt object and then sprayed blood everywhere, which would make sense. But he was saying, no, she just happened to fall, somehow cracked her head
She
hard
tripped
enough.
and then really cracked her head, and that's splattered.
Blood everywhere, whatever, all over the place. But it was bad, yeah. And it's interesting, though, to watch that. Because if nothing else, it does show, one, it's interesting because, again, this guy got away with it 2 other times. But also, it shows just how sometimes, some of it's good lawyering. Some of it's, it just shows how evidence can be interpreted drastically different. And, and kind of what might usually seem like a slam dunk case can always, like, depending on the attorneys and how it's presented, can ultimately be, very hard for the state to prove. So it's really interesting to watch, and just seeing the guy's demeanor throughout. Yeah, it's interesting. But
well, there you have it. It's the Murdaugh murders and the staircase or the stairs, something like that. And I think that one is also on Netflix because I remember scrolling past it there.
They're somewhat like similar on the way.
They are, and the thing is, like, if you think about it, is that's kind of like with the field of psychology. There's plenty of similarities when it comes to the human demeanor, when it comes to like crimes or just shock, empathy or lack of. So all these things that kind of come into play that you wouldn't think twice about them, and there's only a handful of very smart criminals who are able to connect all those dots so that they can appear to be innocent. These 2 guys were not it. Neither of them were it. No. Even though Alex tried to seem very, human and suffering, grieving about the stuff, the people didn't buy it.
And one last comment, because I know I said it earlier, I don't know if it was his decision or not. It wasn't his decision because the attorneys were asked later on, Alex's attorneys were asked later on whether they regretted putting him on the stand. They said no, which I don't know how you don't regret putting him on the stand. But that leads me to believe they were the ones who told him he should testify. I mean, obviously he agreed to. Yeah. They can't force you to. But but yeah, it makes it even worse.
Yeah, and it's also, I mean, there's a slight chance that they didn't want to throw him under the bus, right? And say, we did, but he wanted to or whatever. Like they were just kind of trying to keep a united front. But no, that is a fair point. So check out those documentaries if you want to, be entertained by some true crime, as true as it gets. Yeah. On Netflix, the I haven't seen that staircase one. I want to watch it, but the Murdaugh murders is pretty good. I still got maybe like 1 episode to go, but it's really good.
It's like a movie, but not. It's exactly. Like it's real life, but it's crazy enough.
And it's pretty fast paced. Like they don't, sometimes on some documentaries, if it's like a longer series, there is at least 1 episode or big chunks of a couple episodes where it's like almost feels like there's a lull in the whole storytelling. This one just goes like full throttle. I mean, there's so much to discuss that they just go full throttle the whole time. So it's pretty engaging too. Yeah,
I will say that the staircase does have those moments.
Okay,
dead space,
and there's bound to happen, in all these things.
There's a lot of it's kind of interesting if you're into, like, if you're an attorney or something, because you see them doing like prep for the trial and stuff in the room. What if we talk about this? Should we bring this up? How do we keep this out? Because there was like some stuff like about him being a gay lover, and that might have been why his wife found out. Whatever, he didn't want to getting out. Who knows? Yeah. But they were trying to keep that out. It was like, so some of it though, like, say people who aren't into the law, it's really boring to watch. Yeah. But overall, it is interesting.
Yeah, check them out. Update on Andrew Tate, which is
still in jail.
Still in jail. So as of right now, and to your earlier point about him the Romanian court being like, I'm going to extend it again another 30 days. Now it's going to be 90 days, and he is at least supposed to be in custody until March 29th, so the end of this month. But the reason why we wanted to discuss him is really something that happened in the past week. There are rumors that he has lung cancer.
His attorneys, right?
Well, so his attorneys, and then his attorneys were saying that he was asking to be able to go to Dubai to get some like treatment or diagnoses or whatever, and the court was like, nah. So that was the attorneys. Yeah. I think at one point his manager,
someone with his company,
his manager was like, he has lung cancer, and I'm gonna take him to Dubai for his treatment or whatever. Yeah. But then at one point he goes, that's a lie. I don't like Andrew Tate goes. Yes. That's a lie. I don't have lung cancer. I am in my prime, and
I am the number one influencer.
Exactly.
I would never get sick.
And they want to bring me down or whatever. Yeah. So at this point, it's like, dude, who knows? Yeah. Now the more in-depth.
He says I never smoked in my life.
Yeah, exactly. Like that, But then he's smoking like cigars. Again, not the same, and maybe not as noxious. And as often and as noxious as a cigarette, right? Or that cigarette addiction. But is it a possibility? Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't know.
You don't need to smoke to get lung cancer.
Exactly. So the more detailed explanation of what kind of created these rumors was that apparently there was some sort of mass in one of his lungs that gave way to that speculation that he might have some cancer. The thing is, they haven't been able to study it to see if it is or not. Of course. Because of course, like, we're gonna keep him here for a little bit longer.
Yeah. I'd say if and when he ever gets convicted, I think he's gonna get time served.
Probably.
The way it's going. It just keeps getting extended.
Assuming there's that equivalent in Romania, right? Because we also don't know what Romanian law is like. Exactly. But the last thing that I wanted to talk about was he obviously has been communicating with the outside world through Twitter and I think his website or emails, right, to his followers. And his emails have been all over the place. So first, obviously, he's like, I'm innocent. This is the system trying to frame me and silence me and all that. Yeah. There's the one. And then there's just the random ones where he was, I think it was almost like a dig at his followers, which is like, the best person needs better people behind him. Yeah. Like saying, you guys suck. Like, you're not giving me as much support as you should.
You're not up in arms to release me.
Exactly. And then there was one recently that generated a lot of memes where he was like, I looked at myself in the mirror and I didn't recognize myself. Full head of hair, long beard. So people were like, full head of hair, that's a big optimistic, bro.
Well, a big thing he says on the podcast all the time is he always says he's not losing his hair.
Yeah. He's like, I'm bald by choice or whatever. Yeah.
It's like, no, you're not.
Like, well,
and some people
you are choosing to be bald because you have very little hair.
Exactly. Yeah, because your hairline's receded.
Which makes sense why you would choose that. It's kind of the route that I'm taking really soon here.
Would somehow emasculate him if he said that he was losing hair. So it was like, no, I just choose to be this way.
Exactly.
All right, man.
Okay, dude, for sure.
Yeah, I saw the full head of hair too.
Yeah, it's like, so then the latest of these diatribes is he, and I copied verbatim the whole thing. He goes, so this is him predicting when he's going to go out on bail and be released and whatever. And he goes, for the last 3 years, the evil elites were talking about the Great Reset. They were right. It's coming. But it will not work in their favor. The Great Reset begins the day I am released from jail. Okay. Self-centered much? Yeah. Every day I write lessons. Every day I further prepare for my release. Their lies cannot hold me forever. The day I am released, the universe will split in two.
Oh my God.
If you knew what would happen to every student of the real world as soon as I am released, you would already be inside. I only warn you to hurry. Their lies are breaking. We launch very soon. End quote. This sounds like a really bad course sales funnel.
Yeah.
It's like, if you knew what's coming, you already would have paid the $97.99 that I'm charging to be part of this exclusive group.
It also
and then we launch very soon. What the fuck are you talking
sounds
about?
very arrogant. Obviously, it also almost sounds like something that could be construed by the Romanian government to keep him in jail even longer.
Yeah.
So was it some sort of threat? Are you gonna
exactly.
try to, attack people?
Is there some sort of planned attack that you're preparing, or
some loose it probably is a like you said, it probably is a sales thing. It's him probably trying to profit off this, in some way when he gets out. But yeah,
because I mean, he has those dumbass universities. It was the alpha male, whatever, and then it's all just regurgitated bullshit that you find anywhere on the internet on these guys who are misogynist, and he's just selling them on promises if you buy my course, you're gonna have every woman at your feet.
Yes, yeah, and they're like, oh, this is just gonna happen. He's telling me.
Exactly. If I follow, the advice of the top G, I will be a top G myself. That's not how things work, bro.
It's any of that red pill shit or whatever. But,
exactly.
Yeah, I don't know, man. The irony of the whole cancer thing too is you see why he would say that, right? To get out. Mm-hmm. Maybe he thinks that one, even if he's not able to somehow escape or whatever, he'll get out of the prison for a little bit to go to Dubai.
Yeah.
Also, maybe a chance to try to get away.
Well, the thing is, with going to Dubai is he could be just that's just almost like a risk of fleeing,
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. So that could be the other chance. The thing is, he's like, oh, I can get away, I can escape. The other thing is, though, obviously, if he's like, oh, that'll hurt my brand if people think I have lung cancer,
right?
Because it makes me look weak or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Bullshit. No, so that is fair.
I think he's struggling with this, oh, can't people because it got out. Since it got out, then he's like, oh, I can't you
need to do some damage control.
Yeah,
exactly.
Because what do people think I'm whatever, less of a man because I have a fucking disease that you can't control. But whatever. So I think that's why, it's this weird ass dynamic where his attorneys and shit are like, let's get you out, let's do this.
Yeah.
This is why we try to get you out of here. And he's like, oh, no, it leaked. Oh, shit. No, I don't care. I'd rather, not look weak.
The lies are crumbling down. Yeah. It's not that they're finding all this evidence. They're just, crumbling down.
Well, for the court to keep continuing his stay in jail while this court's pending.
There must be something that the prosecution is
finding.
Something's
coming up.
Yeah.
They're making progress, at least. Or it's going in the direction that, convince a judge to keep extending it.
Exactly, because if we entertain, again, not knowing what Romanian law is like, entertaining just the idea that, okay, a judge is still supposed to be impartial and not give favoritism, but it's going to give some deference to the prosecution who's investigating the potential existence of a crime, they're going to be like, okay, well, show me what you have. It's like, well, Your Honor, this and that this is how we're getting there. We need more time. For the judge to approve it, there must be something behind it. There must be some substance.
Well, and, it'd be different if this was Russia or North Korea, right?
Right.
But it's not, right? So it's there's got to be something, at least some evidence that's being presented that's convincing them to keep him incarcerated while they continue to investigate. And obviously, they know he's a flight risk. The guy's loaded.
Yeah.
He could get a jet and fly out, very easily, and I'm sure. I have no doubt in my mind he would if he
with
could.
a full head of hair.
Yeah, because
with his full head of hair, just just waving in the wind of his of the airplane.
Dude, I'll say this: not only and I don't have any hair, but I don't pretend to.
Yeah.
But his beard looked like shit too. It's all growing out. Dude, your face, it's your hair in general. Just don't talk about it. It looks horrible.
Yeah.
Just keep it shaved and don't bring light to it. But anyway.
Oh God.
Yeah, so that's that. He's still locked up. Long story short.
Long story short, he's still in jail, at least until March 29th. We'll see if there's another extension. I don't know if that's even possible, but
hopefully there is, because otherwise the world's gonna end. So.
It's true, because once he's released, the universe will split in two. Anyways, that was it. He's still in jail.
Yep.
We'll see what happens. We might give you another update. Highly unlikely we'll give you one on Alex Murdaugh because it sounds like his saga is pretty much done. If he appeals or something happens, we might talk to you guys about it. But check out those documentaries, and we'll keep you posted on Andrew Tate and his saga. Any parting comments, Jeff?
Yeah. Do you think Tate's going to get convicted of anything?
I do. This is rough because it's
what do you think he's going to get charged with?
I do think he's going to get charged.
Okay.
Because I feel like even the Romanian prosecutors wouldn't want to just keep extending this to come up with a huge nothing burger. So I feel like at least they have enough to charge him. I mean, without knowing what they come up with, I don't know that they're gonna convict him or not. But charge him, I feel like they definitely will.
Yeah, I don't think because they know the publicity, they know what it's drawing light to the country, and if it's not anything there, at least that they can present to try to prove the case, they wouldn't be drawing it out either.
Exactly. And then drawing it out so long, like 3 extensions, or I guess 2 now.
Yeah, and it's like he's got citizenship in other countries. Like that's not something they're going to want to do. So just to do it, like he's a political prisoner. No,
exactly.
Like something's going on, and at the very least, he's going to get charged.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, I do think that's going to happen, but we'll find out, I guess, soon enough.
Well, maybe.
Or not, yeah. Or hopefully not, because we don't want the universe to split in two.
It'll just keep getting extended. Yeah. 3 years from now, we'll be back here. Another update.
And then turns out later on that Romania is just
Tate.
as bad as Russia and North Korea, where they like just keep political prisoners.
That's
right? Like when Russia kept Griner
Yeah.
for and for like bullshit.
Yeah.
So, but at least right now, there's no reason to believe that's the case. So, we'll see what happens. All right. Well, if you don't already follow us on TikTok, the username is going to be on the screen somewhere. Yeah. And we'll see you next time. This was Lawish.